Something felt different the second that segment flipped, and if you've been around the NBA long enough, you know when the tone shifts like that, it usually means something real is about to come out. Not noise, not debate TV theatrics, but actual information that people inside the league are already reacting to. And when Stephen A. leaned in and dropped that line about Golden State and Ja Morant being in serious talks, that wasn't just another rumor to scroll past. That hit different, especially when you start connecting it to everything we've been hearing quietly around the Warriors these past few months. Because let's be honest here, this team has been searching for something. Not just another role player, not just depth, but something that changes their direction without forcing them to tear everything down. And that's where this gets interesting. The idea of Ja in a Warriors jersey isn't just about talent. Everybody already knows what he can do. It's about timing. It's about where this franchise is right now, sitting between what they were and what they're about to become. And when you really think about it, the Warriors haven't had a player like Ja Morant in this system, ever. Even at their peak, with all the movement, all the shooting, all the IQ on the floor, they never had that kind of downhill pressure every single possession. Someone who doesn't just stretch the defense, but collapses it instantly. That changes how teams would have to guard Golden State from the opening tip. Now picture this for a second without overthinking it. Steph running off ball like he always does, dragging defenders out to the perimeter, and Ja attacking a defense that's already out of position. That's not something teams can easily scheme against. That's the kind of pressure that forces mistakes, forces rotations, forces panic. And once a defense starts reacting instead of controlling, that's when the Warriors have always been at their most dangerous. But here's where it goes deeper than just highlights and offensive upside. What caught my attention in that first take segment wasn't just the trade talk. It was how both Stephen A. and Shannon kept circling back to one thing: environment. Golden State genuinely believes they can stabilize Ja, not just as a player, but as a presence inside a championship culture. And if you've watched this franchise closely over the years, you know that's not something they say lightly. This is an organization that has built its identity on structure, accountability, and leadership from within. Steph, Draymond, even Kerr, that foundation is real. So when you hear that they think they can bring Ja into that and elevate him, that tells you they're not just looking at his talent, they're looking at the long-term picture. And let's not ignore what this says about how the Warriors view the Western Conference right now. Because while other teams are getting younger, faster, and more aggressive, Golden State knows standing still is not an option anymore. The margin is gone. The days of just relying on experience alone are over. If they're really in these conversations, it means they're ready to shift gears. Right? Always with Curry, if you believe he can still lead the Warriors to another great season. And at the same time, it raises a question that a lot of people aren't comfortable asking yet. How long can you realistically keep this version of the team together without making a move like this? Because every season that passes, the window doesn't slam shut, but it definitely gets tighter. And adding someone like Ja isn't just about extending that window, it's about redefining it completely. Now, from Memphis's side, this isn't as crazy as it sounds at first. When a franchise starts questioning availability, consistency, and direction all at once, conversations like this happen behind closed doors way earlier than fans realize. And if the Grizzlies feel like they've hit a ceiling with their current structure, moving Ja could be their way of resetting without going into a full rebuild. But that's where things get complicated, because Golden State would have to give up real assets. We're talking about pieces that actually matter to their rotation or their future. This wouldn't be a low-risk swing. This would be a statement move that tells the entire league they're not fading quietly. And internally, you have to wonder how that conversation is being handled, because bringing in Ja changes roles, changes touches, changes the way this team operates on a nightly basis. That's not a small adjustment, especially for a group that's been built around a very specific style for over a decade. Comment: the dynasty is not over if you think the Warriors still have more to show. But at the same time, there's something about this that just fits when you zoom out. Not perfectly, not safely, but in that risky, high-reward way that great organizations sometimes lean into. The Warriors have never been afraid of redefining themselves when the moment calls for it, and this feels like one of those moments where staying comfortable might actually be the bigger risk. And what really keeps this conversation alive right now is the fact that nobody shut it down. No immediate denial, no quick dismissal, just silence and reactions. Around the league, that usually means there's at least something real behind it. Because if this actually moves forward, if this turns from talks into action, you're not just looking at a trade. You're looking at a shift in how the Warriors plan to exist in the next era of the NBA. And the craziest part is, we're probably still only hearing a fraction of what's really being discussed behind the scenes. And there's one more layer here that hasn't fully been unpacked yet. Something that could completely change how this situation is viewed, depending on how things develop over the next few days. Because what people around the league are starting to hint at quietly is that this may not be just about Ja Morant alone. There are indications that Golden State has been exploring multiple scenarios at the same time, almost like they're preparing for more than one version of this offseason, depending on how these talks evolve. And when a front office starts operating like that, it usually means they're closer to making a big decision than they're letting on publicly. Now think about how that impacts the locker room dynamic if something like this actually happens. Steph isn't just a superstar. He's the emotional center of everything this team has been for years. Bringing in a player with Jay's personality and play style doesn't just add talent. It introduces a new voice, a new rhythm, a different kind of energy. And whether that blends smoothly or creates friction is something no analyst can predict from the outside. But here's what makes Golden State different from most organizations. They've handled strong personalities before. They've managed expectations, egos, and pressure at the highest level. That experience matters, especially when you're potentially bringing in someone who needs both structure and trust at the same time. If there's a place that can balance those two things without losing control, it's this one. If you're a real Warriors fan and want to stay updated on everything happening with this team, subscribe now because things could get interesting very soon. At the same time, there's a basketball reality that can't be ignored. Ja thrives with the ball in his hands. Steph, even though he's elite off-ball, still dictates the flow of the offense in crucial moments. So the real question becomes how those responsibilities get divided when the game slows down and every possession matters. That's where championships are decided, not in transition, not in open space, but in half-court execution under pressure. And that's exactly why this situation feels so intriguing instead of just exciting. It's not obvious, it's not clean, it forces adjustments on both sides. And sometimes, those are the moves that either elevate a team back into contention or expose cracks that weren't visible before. Right? Never count out the Warriors. If you know this team always finds a way to compete. There's also something else being discussed behind the scenes that hasn't really made it into the mainstream conversation yet. If Golden State pulls this off, it could influence how other teams in the West approach their own plans. You might see contenders accelerate their timelines, make aggressive moves just to keep up, because a Curry-Morant combination, even with its risks, would immediately shift how teams prepare for the Warriors on a nightly basis. And if you've been following this channel closely, you already know we don't jump on every rumor. When something like this starts gaining real traction, when multiple voices begin aligning around the same idea, that's when it's worth paying attention. Because the next update on this could drop at any moment, and when it does, it's not going to come quietly. If you don't want to miss what's coming next, this is the moment to lock in. Hit subscribe right now and stay connected, because when this story takes its next turn, you're going to want to hear it as it unfolds, not hours later when everyone else is already reacting. Comment, Curry is still special if you believe he remains one of the most unique players in basketball. And the more this develops, the more it feels like we're right on the edge of something bigger than just a trade discussion. There's a sense that decisions are being lined up, conversations are moving faster than usual, and the Warriors are positioning themselves for a move that could redefine how this franchise looks sooner than most people expect. What happens next could either confirm everything we've just talked about or take this in a completely different direction that nobody saw coming. And there's a growing feeling that the timing of all this isn't random. Around this point in the off-season cycle, front offices usually start separating real moves from surface-level conversations. The fact that this situation is still active, still being talked about in serious circles, suggests that Golden State hasn't backed away. If anything, it feels like they're leaning in, evaluating just how far they're willing to go to make something like this real. What makes this even more interesting is how quiet the Warriors have been publicly. No leaks from their side, no indirect messages, no subtle denials. That kind of silence usually means discipline, but it can also mean focus. When an organization knows exactly what it wants, it doesn't need to control the narrative. It just waits for the right moment to act. Now, imagine the ripple effect inside Chase Center if this actually goes through. The expectations would shift overnight. This wouldn't be about staying competitive anymore. It would be about chasing something real again. And that kind of pressure can either sharpen a team or wear it down depending on how it's handled internally. There's also the question of how the coaching staff adapts. Steve Kerr has built a system that thrives on movement, spacing, and decision-making. Integrating a player like Ja means adjusting tempo, adjusting reads, maybe even adjusting identity in certain stretches. That's not a weakness, but it does require a level of flexibility that only experienced teams can handle without losing themselves. Right, Warriors pride, if you have supported this team through every era. And while all of this is being debated, there are people around the league quietly watching to see if Golden State is about to reset the tone for veteran-led teams trying to stay relevant. Because if this works, if they manage to blend experience with explosive youth without collapsing the structure, it becomes a blueprint others might try to follow. But if it doesn't, then you're looking at a gamble that could accelerate the end of an era instead of extending it. That's the edge they're walking right now. And knowing how this franchise operates, they understand exactly what's at stake. If you've been here tracking these updates, you already know this story isn't slowing down, so don't wait until it breaks everywhere else. Subscribe now and stay ahead of it, because when the next piece of information surfaces, it's going to change how this entire situation is viewed across the league. Comment, "The Bay still believes," if you trust that Golden State can rise again. And one thing that keeps coming up in conversations is that this might not drag out as long as people expect. When discussions reach this level, they either fall apart quickly or move forward faster than anyone anticipates. There's rarely a middle ground, which means the next update might not be a small one. It might be the kind that forces every fan, every analyst, every team to stop and reassess where the Warriors actually stand heading into what could be one of the most unpredictable stretches this franchise has faced in years. If you're part of Warriors Nation and you want to follow every chapter of this team's journey, subscribe now. And if there's one last thing to keep in mind, it's that situations like this don't stay quiet forever. When momentum builds behind closed doors, it eventually reaches a point where something gives, and when it does, it usually comes fast. The Warriors know exactly what kind of move this would be, not just bold, but defining for everything that comes next. Right? With Steph until the end. If you believe that as long as Curry is on the court, anything is possible, stay locked in here, because the next update could drop at any moment, and when it does, you'll want the full breakdown, not just headlines. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next, because this story is far from over.